The format of tonight's meeting is to have a guest speaker share their experience, strength and hope on how the Alcoholics Anonymous program of recovery is working in their lives for 15 to 20 minutes. Tonight we have asked Dave to share.
Thanks. Hi, I'm David. I'm an alcoholic. Happily sober, lucky for you. And a member of the Armadale Friday night meeting, the happiest friend of this group in AA, Victoria, I'd like to say. He'll back me up. But it's attraction, not promotion, so you have to come and find it for yourself. Special welcome. Great to see newcomers here. One of the things I love about AA is everyone's been in exactly the same space, just getting a day's sobriety and starting. I came to AA when I was 19, and that's a bit unusual. I didn't know it was unusual until I got here in the 1970s. What I did was really unusual. I had a dreadful drinking problem. I can summarise it very quickly. I was about to be kicked out of the Royal Australian Navy for my drinking. Trust me, that was a real achievement in 1975. The officers were drunk. I'd get charged in front of them. They'd all pissed. They'd all been drinking at lunchtime. My commanding officer used to knock off a flagon of port at lunchtime. We had a guy whose duty in the ship was to roll over the drunks in their bunks so they wouldn't suffocate. That was your defence forces in peacetime. Times have changed. So, how come I'm in trouble? Because I'm an alcoholic. When I drink, it's just... I used to drink until I dropped, until I blacked out, ended up locked up, hospitalised a couple of times, car smashes and blackouts quite a lot, and I would just go for a drink. What saved my life was a bit of ambition. I wanted to do something in my life, and I was really firing, really doing well. I was heading this direction. The Navy was supporting me, encouraging me. I was studying with professionals in Melbourne, and they were sending me to this, and then I'd drink and destroy everything. And I finally met a lot of people who tell me I shouldn't drink. If you see someone like that throwing away all their opportunities on booze. And then I met someone who told me why I shouldn't drink. And he told me my problem was alcoholism. If I didn't deal with it, basically it would destroy me. And he said, David, you'll never be a social drinker. He said, you've got an allergy to alcohol. Once you had the first drink, you can't stop. Because this is what I'd said to him, look, I have this. And the other thing I didn't do was go in there with any denial. I just said, if I start drinking, I can't stop. I don't know where I'm going to be every time I drink. I don't want to drink, but I'll be drunk tonight, in Pearl Harbor. It's getting worse. I just laid all this out to him, and he said, everything you said to me, the symptoms of an illness, the name of the illness is alcoholism. And he said, David, you're an alcoholic. Now, this guy was a non-alcoholic, but he said, you're an alcoholic, and you need to stop drinking completely. He said, if you don't, you'll end up dead, insane, or in jail, which is a classic big book. It says in the big book, convince a newcomer of the hopelessness of their situation, which is a pretty heavy thing to do to someone. They come for you for help and they say, well, this is your situation, it's pretty hopeless, which is what he did. But then he said, you're someone who needs to remove alcohol from life completely. You can achieve this in Alcoholics Anonymous, and what's more, you can be happy about it. So I was told right up that AA was about happy sobriety, about being sober and being happy, and that intrigued me. I couldn't stop drinking straight away. We got back to Australia. I met an AA member on board that ship. It didn't really work. He was a chief petty officer. I was an able seaman. We had to step outside. We went to the ship and walked. It didn't quite feel like one alcoholic talking to another. And he was studying to be a counsellor, and he was sort of talking to me more like a counsellor. But he told me he hadn't had a drink for 6 years, and that impressed me. And I said to him, here's a good question. What do you do when you go ashore? We're in Hawaii. And I said, what do you do when you go ashore if you don't drink, So that's where my head was at. So this guy laid all this stuff on me, the non-alcoholic. What did I do that was so unusual? I believed him. I came here to AA and heard that that's the hardest thing for most people to do. Why did I believe him? I go back there a lot in my mind. I remember every word he said to me. It just made sense. It just made sense. My life's unravelling desperately. I'm in all sorts of trouble. I just go for a drink and it's a disaster and I can't stop it. And it felt like I was locked into something and it was getting worse. That's what it felt like for me. And I go to this guy and he said, this is what your problem is. You've got an allergy to alcohol. And I thought, well, God, that makes sense. Because I could see other people have 1 or 2 beers and I never could. So he said, you'll never be a social drinker. That made sense. And he said, it's an illness. Well, that made sense. I didn't drink too much, too long, too often, too anything. I just picked up a drink and I was in serious trouble. And he said, it's going to get worse. And it was. That made sense. It was getting worse. All sorts of bad stuff was happening. So I came to AA in the 1970s, and what do you do when you come to AA? It's a really good question. What do you do? Well, you come to a meeting. The first point of contact, you come to a meeting. We didn't have meetings like this. I went to the naval meeting in Sydney, and I heard a guy tell his story. drank for a lot longer than I did, and then he came to AA, and then he said he hadn't had a drink for 10 years. Now, I was sitting in the second row. This was 1975. I can tell you the next thought that went through my head. It had such an impact on me. The next thought that went through my head after hearing that was, this thing works. He just told this amazing, horrendous story of the drinking and destruction. He comes to AA, he hasn't had a drink for 10 years, and he was a great guy. And I connected with AA at my first meeting. There is a requirement for membership. It's a desire to stop drinking, which is our third tradition. The interesting thing about that is it's a bit of a catch-22 because we know you can't. You can be an AA member when you've got a desire to stop drinking, but odds are you can't stop drinking, that's why you're here. So it's a funny one, isn't it, when you think about it. I decided I had to join AA and come to lots of meetings, as many as I could get to with the military commitment. Came to meetings, I shared, I said I was an alcoholic, I believed it, I stood up the floor, I met AA members who were great, they said don't drink, go to meetings, that's all you were told. Every meeting they read a portion of chapter 5. 3 months later I picked up a drink. Now, what I did, and what helped me, and what helps me in my life, I tend to sort of try and work things out as best I can. Now, I didn't have a sponsor, no sponsors, I didn't hear the word sponsor till the 1980s. All of a sudden sponsorship became a thing in the 1980s. But I was devastated because I wanted to stay sober and I couldn't. I mean, I guess we've all been there. But I was in AA and I wanted to stay sober and I couldn't. So I did another very unusual thing, very radical thing. I read the big book. Man, that was the best kept secret in Alcoholics Anonymous in 1975. And the thing about reading the book, and I read the 12 and 12, and they were worried about me. This is true. I didn't know this until years later. I had the 12 and 12 in my back pocket, and a guy told me, this old member nudged him and says, oh, it's getting a bit heavy. That's the sort of AA I came into, where it was just don't drink, come to meetings, you'll be okay. And a lot of people were, and I wasn't. I don't know why it didn't work just coming to meetings, but it didn't. My mind said, well, I do know actually, my mind said have a drink, and I did. So I read the big book, and I found all this stuff that you actually had to do, action. And I just couldn't believe it. I was in a complete surrender. I'd taken the first step because I didn't like... How do I know I took the first step? Because I was absolutely terrified. Absolutely terrified. What was I terrified of? Drinking myself to death against my own will. That's alcoholism, that's addiction, that's what addicts do. They drink themselves to death when they want to stop. And that's what I had, and that's what the first step said, powerless. Powerless, to me, meant exactly what it said. Absolutely no control, no power, nothing about it. I come to meetings, they say just don't drink. And I went in a complete turmoil. I didn't understand what it was I was supposed to do. How can I just not drink if I can't do that? So I did what we all do. I made a decision not to drink on a daily basis, but I read the book. And as I said before, and the 12 and 12, and I started putting that into my life. And how I did that, it was no sponsor. I just used my own intelligence. If I understood something, what it meant to do, I did it. Because there's no denial. If it says do this, and I know I can do it, I do it. If it says do this and I know I can do it and I don't do it, then I'm in some sort of denial. That's the way I look at it. I wasn't. I was in complete surrender. I was willing to do anything to get sober. And as I was reading the book, it started talking about making amends to people, it started talking about putting a higher power in your life. It started talking about accepting that you can't stop drinking, basically. You have to surrender, completely surrender. And I'd done that. And as I started working through the steps, incredible changes came in my life. I started having a look at myself. Some of the things that were really important in those days from the book were resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. It doesn't say alcohol destroys alcoholics. It says resentment destroys alcoholics. So I started getting that this was a program about changing your thinking. Stinking thinking leads to drinking. Identify the stinking thinking and change it. If you change your thinking, you change your life. And I was young and I was pretty open-minded, thank God, and I was desperate, so I was able to do this process and engage in this. I also didn't realise it, but I was accepting full responsibility for myself, which is the journey in AA, to accept responsibility. Now, it's funny, there's a fantastic piece of AA literature called A Member's Eye View of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you see it lying around or online, have a read of it. It's the most brilliant thing I've ever read on AA. And he says, we say... They used to say in the 1970s, I don't say much now, it's a health problem and not a moral problem, alcoholism. It's a health problem and not a moral problem. Yet we've got to do a moral inventory. And they used to say this a lot, they don't say it so much now. Whatever you did to get you here, you're not responsible for. But now that you're here, you're responsible. Well, then if we're not responsible for it, I used to think, why do we have to make amends to people we'd harmed? And I started to see that this was a journey of accepting responsibility for my illness and myself. And how I changed my life, the third step was a huge turnaround for me. And I know why the third step's there in AA. The third step in how I started to live the third step was this. Nothing goes wrong in my life. Things just go against my will. So by putting a higher power in my life, or the idea that perhaps things are going to work out differently from how I plan them. Now I'm 20, remember? You've got to remember, I'm 20 trying to put a life together. I love AA meetings, I'm doing AA meetings, but what I'm really interested in is getting a life together outside of AA to share at the meetings. So I'm going for jobs, I'm studying, I'm applying for jobs, I'm a musician, I'm auditioning for things, I'm not getting too far, and I'm saying, thy will be done. And of course, when you're 20, that job you go for is the only job that's ever going to be the most perfect job you're ever going to have. That woman you have a crush on is the only woman you're ever going to love. So it's a big deal, getting through stuff when you're young and sober. I can see it now. And so the third step was crucial in my recovery because nothing went wrong. It just didn't work out the way I wanted things to work out. And that's what a perception thing. And I still use that today. I then the other steps, the inventory steps, I started having a look at myself. I put the resentment thing into my life. I saw the value of that because I met people in AA who were full of resentment and I wasn't attracted to it at all. And I met people in life. I started getting out there and I started seeing that some people were full of resentment and anger and I didn't find it very attractive. But also I saw that as an alcoholic that can trigger off drinking for me. And I don't need to read that in books anymore because I've seen people come to meetings and get well and then they get the shits with an AA member, then they get the shits with an AA group, then they get the shits with AA, and then it just builds and unfortunately sometimes they drink. And I've met them and then they come back. And so it's really important for me that I keep that sort of eyes on myself. Now, having made such a great start in AA, and I got well very quickly. There's nothing wrong with getting well quickly. You're meant to get well in AA. I think if you're young, you should be able to get well. You get well if you work at it. And I got well and I was travelling well. And when I was about 24, I went right off the rails. And I had a sponsor at this time, Jim D. He passed away about 6-7 years ago. And he said he couldn't talk to me, couldn't reach me. I remember sitting in meetings and having opinions about everyone who spoke. I don't know what's going through your head tonight, I'm not really interested, but I wish you well. But I remember sitting out there and having opinions. This guy needs, listen to this bloke. I wish he'd get on the program. Oh, she's okay. They shouldn't be going out together. It was just a head full of opinions. And I've learned this. If I have an opinion about you, I actually can't have an experience of you. If you get up here to share and my head goes into opinion making, I'm actually not listening to you and I'm not sort of being open to you. And that's what my ego did. I got a really bad spiritual ego in AA. And the saddest thing about my dry drunk syndrome is the worse I got, the more I convinced myself I was the only one who had it together. Sitting out there, Mr. AA, and I drank again. So what I learned was I can't think like that and stay sober. How have I learned that from my own experience? What have I changed? I immediately got back into the meetings, not that I really left them, and I just had another look at myself, and I had to change. Obviously, I had to change. I knew what I'd lost. I'd had 4.5 years sobriety and I lost my sobriety and I was devastated, absolutely devastated, because I knew I'd lost something really, really precious. And I knew I had to get it back. And so I joined a group and I started back through the steps. I spoke to my sponsor. I did a lot of service work. I joined the Unity group, which is a really big group at the time. My ego was still raging. I thought, I'm a musician, I'll offer myself as entertainment sponsor or something, They didn't need an entertainment sponsor or activities. They needed someone to wash the ashtrays, okay? So that's the job I had. And I learnt in service work through AA to give them myself and expect nothing. Give them myself and expect nothing. Because if you do service work in AA looking for pats on the back, you're going to pick up a lot of self-pity and resentments probably. So I learned that lesson for an alcoholic, to give of myself and not be looking for anything, just to do it for the sake of doing it. And that helped turn me around. And then the big turnaround for me spiritually was this. I heard a guy share at the meeting, David E. He's still around. I told him the other day, a few months ago I saw him. And he stood up and he said, if you've got a higher power and he's not working, sack him and get another one. Now that might offend religious people, but I went, that made sense to me. I thought I was so spiritual I got on the piss. That doesn't make sense. So I started a bit of a spiritual journey. Everyone was doing spiritual journeys in the 80s. So I did meditation, I did workshops, I read the big book, I went to step. There were steps meetings. Now, the 1980s, AA changed. 1980, it changed from two sources, I can tell you because I was there. AA changed from young people and from people who'd been sober a long time and relapsed and realised there had to be more to it than just sitting in meetings talking about drunkalogs. They were the two sources that I saw the change come from. And the young people embraced the program, and then sponsorship started happening. And the groups started happening, steps meetings started coming, discussion groups. So I was going to those. It was great. Spiritual concept I came up with after a lot of years, a very simple thing, very simple, and it's this. Is that me, is it?
No.
Oh, it's fine. They talk about unconditional love. I don't know what that means. They talk about a lot of things. People share. In the 80s, everyone was being non-judgmental. That was the big thing, And as soon as you said something, oh, you're judgmental, and everyone was frightened of expressing an opinion. And I understand where they're coming from because, as I said before, I don't want to come to AA and be sharing a whole lot of opinions here or having opinions about your recovery. So what I learned to do was to wish other people well. Very, very simple. Not always easy. This is not in AA, but in my working life, there are people I wish them well. I wish them well away from me, but I wish them well. And I thought, if I can actively wish people well, I'm not judging them and I'm not in any sort of resentment. I'm actually really glad for them. And the longer I got sober, the easier that became. I could come to meetings and hear people stand up here and have experienced the complete opposite to me, their experience of AA, and say, I don't need any of that stuff, and I just go to meetings, and more meetings, and I wish them well. I really wish them well because they're sober and that's their experience of AA. It's not mine. I don't need to criticise anyone or bag them. If I do, I'm no saint. If my head drifts into it, I sort of have a really good look at myself because I want to allow you to have your experience of AA, which is very big of me, isn't it, really, when you think about it. That's what I want to do. I want to allow you to have your experience of AA. And my understanding of sponsorship and of this sharing process is all I have to do is share what I've done. I don't have to give you advice. I don't have to tell you what to do. I'm not comfortable with any of that stuff in AA. I just like sharing what I've done. My first sponsor in Sydney used to do this. I talked to him and he got sober in New York. He was 6 years sober in New York and he came to Australia. And he wasn't coping very well with our AA and he told me about the American AA. And I said, truth, it's a completely different language. We'd say, how long have you been in the fellowship? They'd say, how long have you been in the program? Big difference. And I used to say to him, Chaz, what do I do about this? Or how do I... He'd say, I'll share this with you. And he just shared what he did about it and left it like that. And that's my understanding of AA. When Bill Wilson sought out Dr. Bob, he didn't say, listen, Bill, what you got to do is get off your ass and rah. He said, can I share my experience with you because it will help me? And it leaves that space. And I think that's called functional relating. When I sponsor guys, I say, I do the opposite of what I hear a lot of people in AA. I say to them, look, you can sack me at any time. Okay, you can sack me at any time and you don't have to do anything. But I know this, whatever you do in AA, you'll get a result. So, I've sponsored people who never ring me. Became a bit of a joke with one of them. And other people, and I've been sacked a lot as a sponsor. I don't have an issue with that at all because if I'm helping someone and they find someone else who can help them more, go for it. It's not about my ego because I'm happily sober living my life. I want them to get well. So that's my approach to AA. I try not to give any advice except the AA advice. Looking back on it all, I made a decision on a daily basis not to drink and I backed it up with a lot of action. And they said to me in Sydney, they said AA stands for acceptance and action. It was the action part that was hard. I had to work out what it was I actually did because I wasn't getting much at the advice of this or sharing at the meetings. And I'm going back a long time ago, 37 years ago. As there was one steps meeting in Sydney in 1975. So I wasn't hearing people share like this, like me. I was just there were some great people, some very kind, generous people who really looked out for me because I was a young guy, new to the fellowship, and they wanted to see me get well. And the other thing I've had to do in AA is define what it is to be well. Because I was told this is where sick people come to get well, and then I thought, well, how come I hear no one say they're well? Where are the well people? And I realised, like everything else, that's a decision you make yourself. I haven't had a drink since 5th of July, around thereabouts of 1980, and that's important, so I haven't wanted to drink. That's fantastic. That impresses the crap out of me. I don't say it to impress you, it impresses the hell out of me every time I hear myself say it. I haven't had a drink for 32 years. And it's been effortless. How's it been effortless? Because I haven't wanted to drink. I've had lots of difficult times, lots of challenges, as you do when you stay sober. Had to face myself. A lot of pain in sobriety comes from shattering false self-images about yourself, I find. You think you're this sort of person, you get in a situation and you screw it all up and you're not the great leader you thought you were. I've been through all this. Just got angry and barked at people. I thought, Struth, what happened there? My character came out, I had to face myself. What it is, for me to be well in AA, it's to be honest. Obviously not to drink. but to be honest. Because I've been sober a long time, I protect my right to stand up here and sit up here or stand and share with you exactly how I'm travelling. Because if I can't share with you, if I've had a really rough time or things are not working, or I'm having difficulties in my life and I can't come here and share it with you, then I'm actually not well. That's why I look at it. So I don't have to be travelling well, I just have to be honest about how I'm travelling. And that to me is being well, because I'm not putting on any sort of images or coming from the ego. And that is really important to me. I love being sober, absolutely love it. I felt the 12 steps were for all the old blokes when I came to AA, because I heard stories of losing businesses and marriages and years of drinking. And then I looked at that, read them, and I thought, well, that's about putting all that back together. And then I read the big book on the 12 and 12 after I relapsed that time and realised that the function, the purpose, if you like, of the 12 steps in AA, why are they here? Why are they in AA? Because if an alcoholic works through them, they lose their desire to drink. They get restored to sanity and they choose not to drink. And I read that and I thought, well, they're talking about effortless sobriety, because it's easy to stay sober if you don't want to drink. And that's what I sought in AA, and that's what I've achieved. I've lost my fear of drinking again. I'm not saying I'll never drink again, but I don't have the fear of drinking again. I love being sober. My girlfriend the other day, just to finish, she said something interesting. We were just talking Sunday morning, and she said, you know, I'm glad you're an alcoholic. And I said, why? She said, well, you're the only guy I've ever known who will apologise to me when he's wrong. She said, men are terrible at that. And she said, I know where you are all the time. She said, and I've always got a designated driver. That's true. And she said, if that's the program, I reckon it's fantastic. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.